My mission is simple, to make you money. I'm here to level the playing field for all investors. There's always a bull market somewhere, and I promise to help you find it. Mad Money starts now.
Hey, I'm Cramer. Welcome to Mad Money. Welcome to Cramer America. Other people want to make friends. I'm just trying to make you a little money. My job is not just to entertain, but to educate, teach, put it in context. Call me, 1-800-743-CNBC. Tweet at Jim Cramer. Today, the stock market had a very simple, methodical message. I see London. I see France. I see you in your underpants. You know, I always hated that ditty when I was a kid, but you know what? It perfectly describes today's action, where the averages got clobbered at the opening, and then the sellers were caught with their pants down as stocks rebounded. Dow only closing down just 20 points, S&P tipping just 0.15%, and Nasdaq backsliding 0.47%. Yep, this morning, investors saw London, and they saw France, not to mention Milan and Madrid. Specifically, they saw the European bourses getting hammered as COVID cases came roaring back on the continent. They figured we'd import those losses from Europe, so they furiously sold their stocks to get out ahead of the weakness. Many of these jokers were probably trading in their pajamas, maybe the ones with feet, Dr. Denton's. As the problems of Europe came cascading down to our shores, panic pretenders here dumped shares at a 10-to-1 ratio, meaning there were 10 shares for sale or down for every one share someone was trying to buy. Now, the late, great Mark Haynes, one of CNBC's finest, always used that 10-to-1 ratio to call bottoms, including the generational bottom that he nailed in March of 2009. When the ratio of sellers to buyers is 10-to-1, he would say you have to hold your nose and buy, because that kind of fear rarely lasts. Usually it leads to what we call a crescendo of selling, followed by a nice rebound. Sure enough, this morning's European-inspired sell-off turned out to be the perfect buying opportunity. I see London, I see France, I see sellers in their underpants. But it's not just these weak hands that got too scared this morning. The fact is, we were able to bounce because, I don't know, I was looking at a little, I didn't take the geography class, but I am absolutely certain of this. The United States is not Europe. And that's something that pajama traders still haven't figured out. Now, I know we got a global economy. These days, we're all connected by cell phone. We can trade anything we want in Europe with a keystroke. We do a lot of business over there, and they do a lot of business over here. That's where it ends, though. So you can't just extrapolate from there to here. It doesn't work that way anymore. Europe's a different continent, for heaven's sake. Hey, why don't I tick these things down so you know what the heck I'm talking about? The way this kind of extrapolation is so wrong. It leads you astray. It led many people astray today. I'm determined to stamp it out. First, COVID. Europe did a much better job of tamping down the virus than we did. But then they eased up on the restrictions, and it's once again spreading like wildfire. Almost every country in Europe is now experiencing record case levels day after day, just like they were back in March and April. Why? Well, because this virus is relentless. The moment you reopen certain facilities, and here I've got to tell you, when you reopen the bars and the restaurants, you're back in COVID transmission business. While the Europeans embraced masks, they made the mistake of thinking they had the pandemic under control. The same mistake we made before we had our second wave. When you reopen the bars, I am telling you, you're asking for trouble. Now, Europe's seeing a horrific wave of new infections, and it looks like they're on the verge of going back into lockdown. In some countries like Spain, where my daughter lives, that means the government tells you when you can go out, when you can get groceries, and if you violate those rules, you pay a stiff fine. So a lot of people looked at Europe and figured America must be headed back into a lockdown, too. But you know what? That's just not going to happen. It's just not politically viable in this country. When Europe shut down, their governments made sure everyone kept getting paid. That's what they did. We can't reliably do that here. We can't even pay the people who work at restaurants who are being fired, which means another shutdown would absolutely devastate the economy. Plus, there's way too much political opposition to shutting down. The governors and mayors are not going to let it happen. They might close the bars and restaurants, but they won't shut everything down. We are not going to follow them. Second, when these European economies get shut down, they take their banks with them. The European banks are all more thinly capitalized than even the worst American banks. There's a reason why Santander and Deutsche Bank, the two largest in Europe, sell for $2 and $9, respectively. $2. Actually, Santander's under $2. And don't even get me started on the Italian banking system. Without massive government intervention, they could have a financial crisis on their hands any minute. But our banks, they're doing just fine. We're going to tell you more about them later. And they're much less linked to Europe than these stupid stupid traders think they are. Much less than a decade ago, definitely. Hey, you know what? Their banks need tons of capital. Our banks, we have too much capital, way too much capital. It's night and day. There's no linkage, people. Third, Europe has closed its doors to American travelers who are, in many cases, huge sources of tourist capital. The Europeans figured we were reckless COVID brigands who'd cause another wave of outbreaks. Nope. Turns out our government just didn't take the virus seriously, and the moment European governments stopped taking it seriously, they ended up in the exact same boat as us. At this point, they might as well reopen their borders to American travelers. Not that anybody's doing much traveling anyway. The point, though, is that we haven't had any real travel with Europe in months. Their tourists don't go here, and our tourists don't go there. So these new outbreaks don't change anything. Fourth, most American companies diversified away from Europe a long, long time ago. Remember, even before COVID, the Eurozone had been limping along for years. Europe hasn't been a great growth engine in ages. I'm not saying it's unimportant. There's a lot of people, it's like 800 million people over there. But American firms that try to do business there often end up getting burned. Like when GE foolishly bought that Alstom for far more than it was worth and wasn't able to rationalize it at all. They're still paying the price for that stupid acquisition. Sure, the consumer packaged goods plays move a lot of merchandise over there, but they won't be hurt by a recession. Same goes for McDonald's, for Nike, for Starbucks. Fifth, finally, our big tech companies still do tons of business in Europe, but these are all stay-at-home economy stories. The biggest threat to them is the European regulators. France and the Netherlands just reached a deal to go after 20 American tech companies for unfair practices. Oh, but we've seen this before. And usually the problem goes away after our tech firms pay some kind of fine. It's a shakedown. Europe doesn't have a tech sector that can rival ours, so it's not like they can take the business elsewhere. But periodically, they get hit up for big money. No big deal. Business as usual. Check, please. All that said, yes, COVID is making a third run at us here. We're still jokers when it comes to testing and contact tracing. I call it like it really is, all right? Jokers. Okay, I'm not going to mince words. 200,000 people died, for heaven's sake. We don't have a national strategy in every state. It's like if Montana were to fight against Japan and Nebraska was going against Germany in World War II. That's kind of what we're doing. I don't think it's efficient. But unlike Europe, we've gotten used to the pandemic because it never really went away. We spent months coming up with coping strategies to protect our most vulnerable. In Europe, they thought they had the virus beaten. They had months where things were almost back to normal, and now the COVID's come roaring back. It's like they're reliving what happened in March. The bottom line, on a day like today, where the morning traders foolishly dump everything, you've got to pounce and do some buying. I don't know when the next buyable dip will come along, but when it happens, and it's one of these ones where the pajama traders cause it, I want you to be ready.
Don't miss a second of Mad Money. Follow @Jim Cramer on Twitter. Have a question? Tweet Cramer. #MadTweets. Send Jim an email to madmoney@cnbc.com or give us a call at 1-800-743-CNBC. Miss something? Head to madmoney.cnbc.com.
Shepard Smith here. Thanks for watching CNBC on YouTube.